that doesn't happen often. I'd say 80% of the time that we fish, we see zero difference. Again, it's something that we look at and say, just personal preference, and so we do it that way. But most of the time, it makes no difference. They both work. And Dan would typically tie his a little bit closer. He would be probably closer to 3 inches, first hook to second, or front hook to back hook. And again, I'd be closer to 4 inches.
Does that treble laser change with structure? Do you still fish the trebles when you're fishing the structure?
I mean, there's a number 8. It's pretty darn small. Usually I don't go much lower than that. But, I mean, let's say you got a big fat crawler on there. He's taking up
one of them.
You know, one hook plus the other 2 are kind of tight to him. So I don't worry about the structure part of it.
You're going to snag up some. That's part of fishing. That's what keeps lure manufacturers in business.
Do you think the color hook makes a difference?
You know, everybody says red hook on the front. Red hook, red hook. Okay. That's all you hear. Well, yeah, I got some red hooks on there, but as soon as you catch a few fish, you grab the hook with a pair of pliers and you're ripping it out. Now that hook turns gold because they're all gold underneath. So what caught the fish? A red hook and a gold hook. Now it's like, heck with it. I just stay with natural, black or, you know, a bronze color, something like that. I don't really know if the red hook really matters.
Another one that we use both. I tend to use more reds, but I don't think that we catch more fish because of it.
We will put the red bead on there once in a while, which is more consistent.
When you're fishing structure with the bottom bouncer, you ever bring your main line up to equal your, or go greater than your leader? Pound test. I see about, you said 10-pound test and like a 20-pound leader. When you're fishing a lot of structure and hanging up a lot, do you ever increase your main line?
If we're fishing somewhere where we've got to, you know, we're going to be hitting bottom a lot, structure, and the fish are right down in the structure, then we'll typically go to braid for that type of fishing to help with that. We'll go to a heavier braid, 30-pound test braid.
Pretty common. You got to remember too is, let's say we're picking on a reef out here, and you suddenly see the depth change on your fish finder, and you got into an area that's, you know, oh shit thing, you know, we're gonna all snag up. Speed up, just take off. Them fish, if they're up there real high on top of them reefs or right off the edge, I mean, they're there to feed. It don't really matter if it's putting in front of them or if it's moving.
That'll keep your stuff from hanging.
I can just see you using 10-pound with a 20-pound leader that you're going to be tying a lot of bottom bouncers.
Could be, but you got to watch because you shouldn't be dragging. You don't want to be dragging that bottom bouncer. You just want to be ticking with it, and that's where if it's a scenario where it's really uneven and a lot of hangs, we won't even take that rod. We won't even put it in a rod holder. We'll just run one.
Just drop down the fish in 2 rods.
And just hold it, and then that way, and you watch the fish finder because your bouncer's always going to be running behind. You're going to know what that depth change does before your bouncer actually gets there. And so if we see it coming up, we'll start to raise it, and then you can just sort of work it over those. So yeah, in that scenario, we probably wouldn't even take the rod out of our hands.
What's the earliest you caught walleye on spinners? I mean, is there like a magic number, 42, 43 degrees?
I used to say 50, but not anymore. I tell you what, I know, I haven't done it, but I know Mark's gotten a picture of guy catching them on spinners with icebergs floating in the background. So I don't think there is a magic temperature any longer. I used to swear it was 50 degrees. It just seemed like it. But the last few years, I know it's not 50. I know I've done it at probably 43, and I think you could probably do it even sooner.
And you got to remember too that eastern end of the lake, 80 feet down, what's the temp? You know, them fish are, if they're, let's just say it's 45 degrees. Well, that fish is 45 degrees. He's going to move the same speed probably as he would in 45 degree water at this area. Just experiment, you know.
We still start with cranks though. Even having said that, I love early spring crank fishing. It's fun, I enjoy it, but you can catch them on harnesses, there's no doubt.
One comment I'd like to make on that is when the worms get washed into the lake, and that's usually high rain seasons, flood seasons, So they're, in warmer water, they're typically looking for worms to eat because they're getting washed in. I mean, it's unbelievable. I mean, worms wind up in the lake getting pushed down the rivers and stuff. So they're looking for worms. In the wintertime, you don't have that high flow, so you don't have all them worms coming out. So it's not their preferred meal. But it does happen. Like Matt said, 2 years ago, I got a guy at his boards about 10 feet away from a bird. And he showed me the picture of 2 fish he caught, almost 13 pounds. It's pretty amazing. And I don't relate it to it, but I think mostly just there's not many getting washed in the wintertime. They're not coming up, they're not getting washed out.
Do you ever use blade baits early in the season?
Yeah. Yeah. Last year in March, we had a couple of good fish, blade baiting and jig fishing. I don't know, 20th of March is before Spring Valley, so somewhere in there. A little bit of skim ice left on, but we got a little warm up. Yeah, it worked great for vertical presentation.
Feathers on jig baits?
Hair jigs from Bobby.
Hair
right?
jigs?
Hair jigs.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Tip with a big old, when we had that tip, didn't we? Yeah.
Yeah.
You touched on your sonar a little bit. I know you guys are on Hummingbird. Does the side imaging give you an advantage maybe to see how deep them fish are if they're not size are going? Do you feel that the side imaging gives you an edge?
We don't run side imaging. When I was on a boat last summer or 2 summers ago with side imaging, what I started off by saying is, fish high, because you're never going to see those fish. Well, you can on side imaging. It was pretty cool. We were off, off the side of one of the reefs. He had it on, and you can see the white marks so far off to the side of it. It's pretty cool.
We don't use it, or we haven't used it up till now for the type of fishing we normally do. We don't think there's a huge reason to use it. Not to say that it wouldn't come in. The downside to it is that at 1 mile an hour, which is where we pretty much do most of our fishing 1 to 1.2 anymore, the side imaging, that's barely fast enough to get a picture. 4 mile an hour on side imaging is the optimum speed to be running, and so obviously for walleye fishing, we don't go 4 mile an hour very much unless we're just looking around, and so that's part of the reason we haven't made that switch. We've talked about it. We haven't decided for certain. We might play around with it this year. There are some uses for it. There's no doubt about it. We just haven't, I guess, taken that jump yet.
I think it's more of a search tool.
Yeah, it's going to be a search tool. It's going to be very tough to run unless you're running dipsies at 2.5 to 3 mile an hour. You'll get a pretty good picture, but at 1 mile an hour you won't get a picture that'll be very discernible. Help you very much. Yeah.
Any preference on the spinners as far as the live real worms or the Gulf worms?
I think from what I've experimented with a little bit, if the bite's real active, they're hitting everything, blade size, it don't matter. Try the gulp, because it really doesn't seem like it matters. You can catch them on it. When it's a real finicky bite, I think the natural stuff is best or better.
The other place where I see gulp, where I like to use gulp, is if you get into a bunch of white perch or a bunch of just call them non-targets that want to sit out there and just nip your worm. And some of those, it's hard to, you don't always see those on the board. They do it so quick. That's where I think the gulp really helps, because I would rather have an artificial that's out there in its full size, length, smell than a broken night crawler. And so in that scenario, if we're having troubles seeing the bite of non-target fish or having a bunch of worms, we've all seen those days where you no more than get the board set and then you see it just, that white perch out there, and you bring it in and it's gone or half gone. That doesn't do you any good. You basically just set boards all day long back and forth. We'll try and play around with some gulp in that scenario, and it seems to work. Yeah.
Do you do anything different in mayfly season?
Not a whole lot.
I think a couple things you got going for you that time of year is to keep something high.